I'm taking half your millions, including your grandmother's estate," Bradley declared with a smug grin, his voice carrying across the courtroom as if he were announcing winning lottery numbers. The sheer confidence in his tone made my stomach churn. But I sat motionless at the defendant's table, forcing myself to stay composed. "My name is Judith Crawford. I'm 45 years old, and I never imagined I'd be here in a Nashville divorce court, watching the man I married 5 years ago try to claim everything I've worked my entire life to build." Across the room, Bradley sat beside his attorney, looking as though he'd already won. His perfectly pressed designer suit, paid for with my money, of course gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His blonde hair was slicked back in the same style. That once charmed me, but now made my skin crawl. "Your Honor," his lawyer began, voice smooth and confident, "my client is entitled to half of all marital assets, including the significant inheritance Mrs. Crawford received during their marriage." I glanced at the lawyer's overstuffed briefcase, packed with documents carefully outlining Bradley's plan to walk away with my grandmother's fortune. Around us, spectators leaned forward in their seats, hungry for drama and dollar signs. Some were already estimating how much Bradley might pocket. A few reporters had even shown up, drawn by whispers of a multi-million-dollar divorce involving a well-known Nashville businesswoman, Judge Richardson. A sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with steely gray hair studied the paperwork with a neutral expression. 2 decades on the family court bench had likely exposed her to every scheme imaginable, but something told me she hadn't seen what I was about to reveal. Bradley turned in his chair, flashing what he probably thought was a triumphant smile. The audacity of it made my blood boil. This was the same man who once brought me coffee in bed and promised he loved me for who I was, not what I owned. 5 years of marriage, and it had all been a calculated lie. The courtroom felt heavy, stark wood paneling and hushed atmosphere pressing in on me. Outside, Nashville traffic hummed along, life moving normally while mine was being dissected in front of strangers. I tightened my grip on my purse, feeling the envelope inside the one piece of evidence that would change everything. "Mrs. Crawford," Judge Richardson said, fixing her gaze on me, "do you have any response to these claims?" My heart pounded as I rose, but my resolve was steady. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment Bradley's greed would finally catch up with him. "Yes." "Your Honor," I said evenly, "there's something the court needs to see." Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs long before this day. Bradley swept into my life when I was vulnerable. I'd just turned 40 and was running my consulting firm, Brightville Analytics, a modestly successful business that left little time for romance. My grandmother, my closest companion, had passed away 3 years earlier, and I was still grieving when I met Bradley at a Memphis business conference. He was charming, attentive, and unusually interested in my work, helping small businesses streamline their operations. "You're brilliant," he'd say, watching me analyze financial reports. "I've never met anyone who understands numbers the way you do." At the time, I believed he admired my intelligence. Now I know he was calculating my net worth. Our courtship was a whirlwind of expensive dinners and spontaneous getaways. Bradley worked as a pharmaceutical sales manager, yet he always seemed to have money for lavish dates. "I believe in investing in the people I care about," he'd say whenever I questioned his spending. I mistook his generosity for love, never realizing it was part of a long-term strategy. When he proposed after just 8 months, I hesitated. My grandmother had always warned me to be wary of men who moved too fast. But Bradley was relentless. "Life's too short to wait," he insisted. "I know what I want. Tanned, I want you." His proposal was a grand spectacle. A private dinner on a riverboat with a string quartet playing our favorite songs. The engagement ring sparkled. Clearly worth more than his annual salary, though I didn't think twice about that at the time. My attorney, Tricia Holbrook, strongly recommended a prenuptial agreement. "Every successful businesswoman needs protection," she advised. "It's not romantic, but it's necessary." Nervous about raising the subject, I worried Bradley would take it as a sign I didn't trust him. But his reaction surprised me. He laughed and waved away my concerns. Of course, darling. Whatever makes you comfortable. I'm not marrying you for your money. I'm marrying you for you. He signed the papers without even reading them, joking that love doesn't need fine print. Relieved, I allowed myself to believe his casual attitude meant my fears were unfounded. Patricia, however, had been meticulous. The prenup safeguarded my existing assets and any future inheritance or business growth. Your grandmother's estate will eventually pass to you, she reminded me. This ensures it stays in your family. At the time, I thought she was being overly cautious. Now, I know she was brilliantly prescient. 18 months into our marriage, I received the call. My grandmother's estate had officially transferred to me. Her house, her investments, her collection of rare books, and $2.8 million in carefully managed funds, far more than I'd ever expected, suddenly belonged to me. Bradley's reaction was unforgettable. His eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. 2.8 million, he repeated, barely containing his excitement. Judith, we're rich. That single word we should have been my first warning from that day on. Bradley's behavior shifted dramatically. Within 6 months, he quit his job, claiming he wanted to explore new opportunities and support my success. In reality, he treated my inheritance like his personal piggy bank. He purchased a luxury car for networking, poured $30,000 into a friend's failing restaurant, booked extravagant vacations, joined an exclusive golf club, and began dressing like old money whenever I questioned his spending. He'd remind me that marriage is a partnership and that couples should trust each other with financial decisions. The breaking point came 6 months ago, when I discovered he'd been bragging at the country club that the inheritance was family money belonging to both of us. He introduced himself as an investor and entrepreneur, conveniently omitting the fact that every cent of his investments came from my grandmother's careful planning. When I confronted him, Bradley dropped the mask. You act like it's some big secret that I married up, he snapped. And now here we were, him demanding half of everything, and me standing with the one document that could end his scheme once and for all. Asterisk. Everyone knows you needed someone like me to enjoy life. Before we met, you were just a lonely workaholic with no social life. Bradley's words sliced through me like a blade knot, because they were entirely false, but because there was a painful sliver of truth in them. I had been lonely when we met. Bradley brought excitement and companionship into a life that had been all work and no joy. But now I understood his game. He'd never been a savior. From the start, he'd been quietly calculating, positioning himself as my rescuer while scheming to seize everything I've inherited. The breaking point came when I discovered a series of emails between Bradley and his attorney. They weren't just talking, they'd been planning this divorce for months, carefully timing it to give him the best chance of cashing in. Bradley had even studied Tennessee divorce laws, digging for loopholes to argue that his emotional support and lifestyle contributions entitled him to a bigger piece of my assets. That was when I called Patricia, my attorney, and filed for divorce first. I refused to let Bradley control the narrative or the timeline. If he wanted to fight over my grandmother's money, I'd give him one, but it wouldn't play out the way he imagined. Now, standing in this packed courtroom, I was ready to show everyone just how badly Bradley had underestimated me. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope. Patricia had prepared for this very moment. The soft rustle of paper echoed in the otherwise silent room. The low hum of the air conditioner, the only background noise. Asterisk, for the first time that morning, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross Bradley's face as he watched me walk to the judge's bench. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady and deliberate, I believe the court needs to review this document before proceeding with any discussion of asset division. Judge Richardson extended her hand and took the envelope. And what is the nature of this document, Mrs. Crawford? It's a prenuptial agreement, Your Honor, I replied evenly. One that my husband signed before our marriage 5 years ago. The shift in the courtroom was instant and electric. Bradley's attorney, Gerald Weston, shot to his feet like he'd been jolted by a live wire. Your Honor, we were not informed of any prenuptial agreement. This is highly irregular. Sit down, Mr. Weston. Judge Richardson said firmly, already breaking the seal on the envelope. I'll review the document and determine its validity. I returned to my seat, locking eyes with Bradley. In less than a minute, his expression transformed from smug confidence to confusion, and then to something close to panic. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering frantically. I caught fragments. She never mentioned. How is this possible? Beside me, Patricia remained perfectly calm. She had spent months ensuring every detail of our strategy was airtight. Just watch, she murmured, a small, knowing smile on her face. Judge Richardson read the agreement carefully, page by page. Patricia had drafted it meticulously 5 years ago, outlining which assets were protected, which debts remained separate, and, most importantly, how any future inheritance would be handled. This appears to be a properly executed prenuptial agreement, the judge announced after several minutes. It is dated 6 weeks before the marriage, witnessed by 2 notaries, signed by both parties. Gerald Weston looked as though he might melt into his chair. He had filed this case without even checking for a prenup. Like Bradley, he'd assumed my marriage was an easy payday. Your Honor, Bradley suddenly blurted, his voice cracking, I need to see that document. I don't remember signing anything like that. Judge Richardson's eyes narrowed. Mr. Crawford, please remain seated and allow your attorney to handle these proceedings. But Bradley was unraveling fast. Judith, what is this? You never told me this is some kind of trap? Mr. Crawford, Judge Richardson snapped, her voice slicing through the tension. You will remain silent or I will hold you in contempt. Your attorney may request to review the document through proper channels. Gerald approached the bench, reluctantly, and began skimming the pages. With each turn, his face paled further. When he returned to the table, he bent close to Bradley, whispering urgently while Bradley shook his head in disbelief. Around us, the spectators buzzed with excitement. Reporters scribbled furiously, eager to capture every detail of Bradley's public humiliation. Finally, Gerald rose again, his earlier bravado gone. Your Honor, my client requests a brief recess to review these documents more thoroughly. Judge Richardson glanced at her watch. Mr. Weston, did you not conduct discovery regarding potential prenuptial agreements before filing your asset claims? Gerald's silence was damning. I'll allow a 10-minute recess, the judge said crisply. But be aware, this appears to be a legally binding agreement that significantly impacts your client's claims. During the break, I watched Bradley and Gerald huddled near the courtroom windows. Bradley's gestures grew more frantic with each passing minute. Even from across the room, I saw the precise instant when realization struck him, when he understood that his entire plan had just collapsed. Patricia quietly reviewed her notes beside me. He's going to claim fraud or duress next, she predicted. Men like Bradley always blame someone else when their schemes fail. She was right when the recess ended. Gerald wasted no time launching into a desperate argument. Your Honor, my client believes he was misled about the nature of this document. Mrs. Crawford presented it as a romantic formality, not a comprehensive asset protection agreement. Judge Richardson arched an eyebrow. Mr. Weston, are you claiming your client signed a legal contract without reading it? Your Honor, Gerald said carefully, my client trusted his future wife. He believed her description of the document's purpose and did not realize the full scope of its implications. I nearly laughed. Bradley, who prided himself on being a shrewd businessman, a master negotiator, was now trying to paint himself as an innocent fool who signed without understanding. This document is clearly labeled as a prenuptial agreement, Judge Richardson said dryly, flipping through the pages. It contains standard warnings advising each party to seek independent legal counsel. Did your client waive that right? Gerald shuffled his papers. Yes, Your Honor. My client signed the waiver and the agreement was notarized with your client present, confirming his identity. Yes, Your Honor, Gerald admitted. Judge Richardson turned her sharp gaze directly on Bradley. Mr. Crawford, when you signed this document, were you forced to do so? Were you under any kind of duress or coercion? The courtroom went silent. All eyes fixed on Bradley as his carefully built scheme disintegrated before everyone's eyes. Bradley's face flushed crimson, a mix of embarrassment and simmering anger. "No, Your Honor," he stammered, "but I thought it was just paperwork." Judith made it sound like it didn't matter. "Did you read the document before signing it?" The judge's question sliced through the quiet courtroom like a blade. Bradley's eyes darted around, searching desperately for an escape that didn't exist. The silence stretched until the tension became almost unbearable. "Mr. Crawford," Judge Richardson pressed, her voice sharp, "I asked you a direct question." I skimmed it," Bradley finally admitted. Judith said it was only a formality. The judge's expression hardened into a mask of cold disapproval. "Mr. Crawford, you signed a binding legal document without reading it and without legal counsel. And now you're asking this court to invalidate it simply because you chose not to take it seriously." Not a sound broke the heavy stillness. Even the reporters stopped writing, riveted by Bradley's very public humiliation. I felt a quiet surge of satisfaction watching him squirm beneath the judge's scrutiny. Gerald, his attorney, tried a last-minute save. "Your Honor, perhaps we could argue that the agreement is unconscionable given the disparity in Mr. Weston. Have you reviewed the financial disclosures included with this prenuptial agreement?" Judge Richardson cut him off. Gerald shuffled through the thick packet of documents, clearly hoping to find a lifeline. "Your Honor, there are extensive disclosures here." "Indeed," the judge replied. Mrs. Crawford provided complete documentation of her assets, income, and projected inheritance. Your client signed acknowledgments confirming he reviewed and understood all financial information. This is one of the most thorough prenuptial agreements I have encountered in my 23 years on the bench. Bradley paled. The once charming golden boy, accustomed to skating through life, was finally facing consequences. Judge Richardson began reading from the agreement, her voice ringing clearly through the silent room. Section 4, Paragraph A. All assets owned by either party prior to marriage remain the separate property of that party. Section 4, Paragraph B. Any inheritance received during the marriage remains separate property and shall not be subject to division upon divorce. Bradley's face cycled from red to white to an ugly shade of green. He gripped the table so tightly his knuckles whitened. "That can't be legal," he muttered, loud enough for several to hear. Section 6, the judge continued evenly, addresses spousal support. Quote, "Neither party shall be entitled to alimony or spousal support from the other, regardless of the length of the marriage or disparity of income." Her gaze flicked up. This section was initialed by both parties and witnessed separately. Gerald scribbled frantically, searching for a loophole that simply didn't exist. Patricia, my attorney, had been meticulous 5 years earlier. Every angle had been anticipated and sealed. "Your Honor," I said, rising to address the court. "Proceed." "Mrs. Crawford, when I inherited my grandmother's estate 18 months ago, I consulted my attorney to confirm the inheritance was protected under Section 4. Paragraph B, we verified it was fully covered. The funds have remained in separate accounts and were never commingled with marital assets. It was the final nail in Bradley's coffin. The prenup wasn't just airtight, had been scrupulously careful. He couldn't claim a penny. Judge Richardson nodded. "Mrs. Crawford, did you use any portion of this inheritance for joint expenses or purchases?" "No, Your Honor. Household expenses were paid entirely from my regular income. The inheritance remains completely separate." Bradley exploded. "That's not true. She bought things for us, paid for vacations, Mr. Crawford." The judge's voice cut like ice. "You are out of order. Sit down immediately." But Bradley was unraveling. "This is insane. I've been with her for 5 years. I supported her emotionally. I gave up my career. You quit your job to spend my money," I said quietly, unable to stop myself. "Mrs. Crawford," the judge warned, though her tone carried a hint of amusement. Gerald tugged urgently at Bradley's sleeve, trying to rein him in. But the mask had slipped. "She trapped me," Bradley shouted. She made me think we were partners, that the money was ours. Mr. Crawford, Judge Richardson said coldly, "If you cannot control yourself, I will have the bailiff remove you." The threat finally broke through his rage. Bradley collapsed into his chair, chest heaving, his carefully constructed image shattered. The courtroom had seen him for what he truly was, a man who married for money and now played the victim when his plan failed. Judge Richardson methodically reviewed the final pages. The room buzzed with restrained anticipation. At last, she removed her glasses and looked directly at Bradley. "Mr. Crawford, this prenuptial agreement is valid, comprehensive, and legally binding. You are entitled to nothing from your wife's premarital assets, inheritance, or business holdings." The words struck him like physical blows. His mouth fell open. "Nothing," he whispered. "Nothing," she confirmed. Furthermore, under Section 7, all individual debts remain the responsibility of the party who incurred them. "Mrs. Crawford, do you have documentation of your husband's debts?" Patricia handed me a thick folder, which I passed to the bailiff. "Yes, your honor credit card balances, a car loan, a failed restaurant investment, and country club fees totaling approximately $87,000. Gerald's face drained of color. The case he had hoped would yield a handsome fee had become a professional disaster. "Mr. Crawford," the judge continued, "not only will you receive no assets from this marriage, but you remain solely responsible for the $87,000 in debt you accumulated." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Somewhere behind me, someone stifled a laugh. Bradley had entered expecting millions and was leaving with nothing but crushing debt. "Your Honor," Bradley said weakly, 5 years of marriage must count for something." "It does," Judge Richardson replied with a razor-sharp smile. "It counts as an expensive lesson in reading legal documents before signing them." Her gavel came down like a thunderclap. "The court grants the divorce petition filed by Mrs. Crawford. No. Assets shall be transferred to Mr. Crawford. All individual debts remain with the party who incurred them. This court is adjourned." Bradley sat frozen, stunned into silence as the reality sank in. 5 years of calculated positioning had collapsed in 30 minutes. Reporters swarmed. Patricia intercepted them with smooth efficiency. Judith, Bradley called as I stood to leave. "We need to talk. This isn't over." I turned to him one last time. "Bradley, it was over the moment you chose to marry me for my money instead of loving me for who I am. The prenup didn't ruin your plan. Your greed did." His face crumpled as the truth settled over him. No inheritance. No assets. Just debt and disgrace. In the months that followed, his world fell apart. The $87,000 debt forced him into bankruptcy within 6 months, destroying his credit and stripping him of his lifestyle. His reputation in Nashville's business community was shattered when word spread of his failed gold-digging scheme. The country club revoked his membership. His luxury car was repossessed. His dating life evaporated as women warned each other about the charming opportunist who treated marriage like a business deal. Bradley eventually moved back in with his elderly parents in Memphis, taking an entry-level sales job. At 47, he was starting over with nothing but debt and a ruined name. I used a small portion of my protected inheritance to launch the Crawford Foundation, providing legal aid to women seeking prenuptial agreements and divorce representation. My grandmother's wisdom about safeguarding family wealth hadn't just saved my finances, it saved me from a lifetime with a man who saw love only as a means to easy money. Justice, in the end, came with a poetic irony that felt almost sweet.